Well, I hope you've enjoyed our series with Caleb Quaye. One of my favorite guests. It's our third interview, and now it's time to put it all together for our entire interview. If you're listening to this via podcast, there's a video version. The links are in the description and the other way around. If you want to see the individual clips, check out our channel, Rock History Music. There'll be links in the description. If you want to help out the channel, the 2 P's are there. You can join our Patreon to get early access to our videos, or you can simply make a donation via PayPal or buy a t-shirt. All the links are there at the very top of the description. You know, people, when I was saying, hey, I'm going to be talking to Caleb, you got any questions? One guy emailed me personally. He says, you know, Caleb's one of the greatest guitarists that ever lived. I said, well, I'll make sure that's from Cat. I don't know what it's short for, but it's a guy. He emails me. Anyway, he wanted to let you know that you're the man.
Oh, bless his heart. That's wonderful. That's great.
Hey, by the way, where's the doc at? Like, I mean, can people order it? Can people, like, where are you at with that?
Okay, where we're at with that, it's all finished. And I don't have an exact date for it, but they're telling me they're shooting for January. This coming January 2023. Yeah. There will be, I can tell you this, excuse me, there will be a public announcement made by the distributor next month, October.
Yeah.
So that'll be out, you know, the word will officially be out.
And you're talking about where people like can stream it or go see it, or?
Yeah, I mean, we're planning on having a like a premiere of sorts, you know, out here in Southern Cal. But after that, it will, you know, they want to get it into the movie theaters, but it'll just be for, you know, a limited amount of time in the movie theaters with all what's going on with the theaters right now. But it would definitely be streamed. So it's either Netflix or Amazon, something like that.
But that's kind of the way it goes for most documentaries. Yeah. I mean, I talked to the Triumph guys. They just did a documentary. And did you find when this was all coming together? And I'm always interested when people write books. By the way, are you writing an autobiography?
Actually republishing the autobiography. Yeah, that's going to be available on Amazon any day this week.
Okay, because someone had said, is it the same one or is it now available? Because it wasn't available for a while, was it not?
It wasn't. It went out of print for a while, so it's being reprinted, republished. It's been updated, and voila, it's all good to go.
I just talked to Jeff Skunk Baxter, and he talked about that one. Because everyone saw that picture, right? You guys all post for that picture.
Yeah.
And there's Jeff Skunk Baxter. I'm going, yeah. You know, and I'd forgotten about that. Tell me about that gig.
Well, that was when Elton put the big band together, you know, after Dee and Nigel and everything. So I think the picture that you're talking about was taken at a rehearsal in Amsterdam when we were rehearsing for the Wembley Stadium gig, which was going to be the first gig, you know. So, you know, I think it was Elton had wanted Jeff to be in the band, but you know, during the rehearsals and stuff, it just didn't seem to fit the chemistry. You know, it was nothing personal. It just didn't seem to fit, and he was funny because. He was 1 minute he's playing guitar, the next minute he's getting on the drums or he's banging some percussion, and it was like he's trying to. I think he felt frustrated as well. He was just trying to find somewhere to fit in. You know,
he was walking into a system too. He was walking into a system that was a tight system.
Yeah. A lot of, you know, I mean, there's strong friendships and you know, years of musical chemistry that was there, you know. So it was, that's what I would put it down to. So he only did the one gig. He did the Wembley Stadium gig, and that was it. He was gone after that.
Were there expectations for you, like when you joined the band again at that point? Because I really paid attention to you in the early days, because everyone who discovered Elton John, let's just say for me in 73, we all went back. We went, wow, 73, he's got all these other albums that he released, right?
Yeah.
Before Goodbye Yellow Brick Road.
Yeah.
And then we started looking, because back then we did, right? We looked at who was on there. We wanted to find out everything we could. But when you joined the second time, how did that go? Was there expectations of Caleb, you're going to be here for a long time, or just join the band?
I think there were. Are you talking about just for me?
For
Me.
for you when you went back in for Rock of the Westies and Blue Moves.
Yeah, we expected it to go on for a long time because we were aware of the combined musical talent and chemistry in the band. When I had ideas of all kinds of stuff that we could have done, but it just wasn't to be. At that time we didn't know that Elton's own personal issues were starting to foment. So all of that just suddenly blew up. So yeah, I definitely had expectations because in our minds, it could have gone on forever. It could have gone on, for a long time. Because there was so much talent in the band. We could have done all kinds of projects.
Those two albums, right smack in the middle of '75, are still two of my favorite albums. And some people poo-poo Blue Moves, and Elton loves Blue Moves, I know. But there was just like he was exploding, it seemed like there was especially on Blue Moves. There was so many things going on one album. And for me, who was hungry, who, like a music fan who says, what happens if you press this? I was going, this is a perfect breakfast for me. This is awesome.
Yeah, I think Blue Moves was a real peak. And, when we were recording it, especially, I mean, we felt, those of us in the band, myself, we felt that, man, this is just, we can do anything. Musically, we could do anything. It was exciting, and that double album, I mean, that came together quick in the studio. I mean, we were in the studio for a month. Some of the songs were written in the studio, but once they were written and it came time to record, I mean, it came together quick. It was amazing.
Was I know Bernie, obviously wrote the words, but was Bernie hovering a lot? Because I know you were on a spoken word album in the beginning there. But and I don't mean that in a bad way. Obviously, he's I mean, I talked to Ray Williams now and then. Ray and I become friends.
Okay,
and he's an interesting chap. But I'm going, what if it didn't? I don't know. But you can't think that way because somehow, as they say, by the grace of God, somehow things happen, right?
Yeah. Bernie was there at the studios in Toronto when we did the Blue Moves album, so he had a bunch of lyrics, and him and Elton would get together and Elton would pull a bunch of lyrics, sit by the piano and let's see, and grab a lyric and come out with a song. It was all happening.
When you wrote the book, it's cathartic for people. I hate to use the cliche word, but you learn stuff about yourself. You have to remember things you might have forgotten. What was the experience like for you when you first started? I'm going to write this book, and was there a catalyst for you wanting to write the book?
It's funny, not really. It's like I had, let me see. After I became a Christian and got into ministry, I'm traveling around, speaking at churches, and I'm sharing my story. And so many times people will come up to me and say, when's the book coming out? And I'm going, what do you mean? What book? Writing a book was just not on my radar. And I would tell people, I don't write books, I do this. I play the guitar, And so that was there for quite a few years, And then I forget exactly what year it was. I'm going to say it would have had to have been about maybe around 2000, I was invited to go to an Elton John fan convention. I don't know if you know a guy called Tom Stanton.
I think he sent me an invite for the last one. I think he's one of the organizers or the organizer. That must be him.
He had a fan magazine called East End Lights. I don't know if you're familiar with that. Okay, so he contacted me. I'd never met the guy before. He contacted me and invited me out there to speak. And Davey was there. I think actually, no, Gus Dudgeon wasn't there. I don't think Gus was there. I can't remember. I know Davey was there. Paul Buckmaster was there. And so we would, people ask questions, do a big Q&A and stuff, so it was a lot of fun. Well, during that time, and it was funny, shortly before I got to that conference, And I had all these people from churches and stuff saying, you need to write a book, you need to write a book. And I'm going, this is nuts, you know. So I prayed about it. Here was the prayer. I just said, God, if you want me to write a book, I need help. You're going to have to send someone to help because I don't have a clue, you know. In Jesus' name, amen. That was it, you know. So I go to, it was at Cleveland where they have the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame place, you know. That's where the conference was held in a hotel adjacent to it. So I go there, and so we're doing this Q&A, you know, with people, with me and Buckmaster and Davey and everything. And when we took a break, this guy comes up to me who was like a member of this convention thing, big Elton fan, you know. And his name is Dale Berryhill, and he's a professional writer, you know, wordsmith, writer. That's what he does. He writes books, edits books, does all this stuff, you know. So he asked me if he could interview me. So I said, sure. So he came up to my hotel room. And in fact, he interviewed me and Paul Buckmaster at the same time. So we did it in my hotel room. And so he's interviewing Paul, you know, and then he starts talking to me. And I start sharing my story. And all of a sudden, this guy, he's got his notepad and paper. He drops his notepad and pencil, and he says, you need to write a book, and I'm going to help you do it. Wow. And it was like, okay, that's prayer answered. And so he did. That's how we got the book.
What was the process like for you? I mean, as I said, you're remembering things. I mean, did you find out? Some people say it's an experiment into getting to know your younger self. But I mean, what was it like for you?
There's part of that. Some of it was a major pain because Dale is like, these guys are like, he's a researcher. So he's going over, he's like a detective, you know. So what we would do, because Dale lives in Memphis, and so I'm out here in California. So we're, you know, a couple of thousand miles apart. So back in those days, it was cassette tapes. So he would send me a bunch of questions, you know, and either phone call, you know, cassette tape, where were you, and blah, blah, blah. And he'd go through all of this stuff. And I'm going, oh, my God, you got to be kidding me. This is just like. So it was really, fortunately, I have a good memory. But he really had me, you know, just at my wit's end, remembering all this stuff and trying to put everything in chronological order. You know, he's fastidious about that, you know. But it worked. It took 5 years.
Good for the brain, though. I mean, you know, taking
those cobwebs out.
Did you keep any notes? Did you keep any notes at all? Some musicians do.
Did I keep any notes?
Like, yeah.
No.
Simon Phillips told me he kept notes because he was such a studio cat. Simon says I kept notes on that, and seeing I was there that day somehow sparked something, you know?
Good for Simon.
I played back, by the way. He played on Small Creeps Day, Mike Rutherford's first album, you know, from Genesis, and I asked him about a song. I said, "This instrumental song." Just as an aside, I thought I'd tell you. Do you remember recording that song because it's called "Out Into the Daylight," and the song goes da 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 da. I said, "It sounds like it's going out into the daylight." Then I didn't know this. He says, "Well, I'll tell you a little bit something that we musicians do. If an instrumental song, we still sometimes mimic words." And I went, what? And then he said, but having said that, I don't remember the song. Can you play it for me? Here I am playing Out Into the Daylight, one of my favorite instrumentals. And you were involved with some of my favorite instrumentals. But I'm playing it back for him. He says, oh, yeah. I said, are you impressed? He says, yeah, that's pretty good. Do you ever feel that way when you listen back? Because some of those things you came up with, man, it's crazy.
Yeah. There were some shining moments, you know, in the midst of our youth and naivety, you know.
If you're in a dentist's office, I've asked everyone this question the last 2 years. If you're in a dentist's office and it's a question of, do you go there? You're sitting there, there's a guy beside you, and it's kind of, he doesn't ask you what you're in for, but he says, so what do you do? Do you go there with the person? Because that's a long conversation with you, especially. So I'm beside you. Hey, sir. So like, what do you do? What do you say? I'm throwing some stuff at you today.
Yeah, sometimes it depends how I'm feeling. Sometimes I'll say I'm a musician.
But then they'll say, have you done anything I would know?
Yeah. Sometimes, depending on how I feel, I'll say, well, I just play in church. I'll deflect it.
Because you know what? Someone, I forget who had told me, I said, well, what about at a party? We were getting on like this. We were just having fun. And I said, well, what about if you're at a party? And I forget who it was. He said, well, sometimes changes the energy in the room because all of a sudden, if you mention the fact that, everyone has a little bit of imposter syndrome, but it's little old me. It's like you look at yourself, you go to the bathroom like everyone else, but you're at a party and you mention, what you were on with a Beach Boy, Harry Nilsson. You did a lot of Liza Minnelli, for God's sakes. But if you mentioned Elton John, any one of those would do it. But saying Elton John, it changes the energy in the room. All of a sudden, everyone's turning around.
Yeah, sure. Yeah. I kind of, I try to be careful about that because I value my space.
Yeah. Well, do you feel, I've interviewed you twice now and I've followed you. And I'm not good at this. Do you find yourself a private guy or?
Pretty much. Yeah, pretty much. Yeah. I've come to terms with the fact I try to guard that because there's, how can I say this? There's a curse that comes with being famous.
Yeah.
And it's very simply the inability to lead a normal life because you're recognized. So I tried to guard that. I like my quiet time. I like being with people, but then I like to come home and I like to have my space, my quiet time. Because that's where the creativity is. That's where the creativity is. If I don't have my quiet time, I just go crazy.
Yeah,
that's where the music comes from.
With Tiny Dancer. My God. As soon as I saw that, I went, oh my God, I got it. This is too good. This is a moment of going, look at that. There's a light not only shining on Elton and Britney Spears, but the fact that this producer found what was kind of hidden that you had created. I've got goosebumps. I swear to God, right now, I've got goosebumps. No, it's that good. I'm going, shining a light on you. That's gotta feel nice.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah. No, it just completely, I had no idea that was taking place. Nobody had contacted me or anything like that. Not that they would even have to, but that was just a total surprise out of left field, which to me is just a blessing. It's just a blessing. It just, all of a sudden it's like, so a whole new generation of folks is going to be, it's going to be liking my guitar playing, which is wonderful.
Yeah. Do you remember how many takes did you do that in? Do you remember that song?
I do. We didn't. It wasn't done in a lot of takes. Maybe 3-4 takes at the most. We didn't, because that was Roger Pope playing drums, Dave Glover, who was hookfoot bass player. So it's basically Elton, at least the rhythm section. The strings were put on afterwards. So it's basically Elton and hookfoot laying down the rhythm track. Well, again, you're talking strong chemistry. We didn't know the song before we got in the studio. So it was one of those things, he played it down in the studio, we gather around the piano, figure out what we're going to do. And within 3 or 4 takes, it's done.
But the producer says, wait a minute, was Hendrix still alive? This sounds like it. I love that.
Me too. I love it, because in terms of influences, my guitar playing in those days and on that particular track, that particular recording, my 2 major influences would have been, number one, Steve Cropper from Memphis, Booker T and the MGs, and Hendrix. So what you hear me doing on that, I'm doing Steve Cropper and I'm doing Hendrix. I'm just throwing that into the song.
Someone resent me that video we did together. I think the first or second one. I'm not sure which one it was, where you say, I'm basically doing Steve Cropper there. And someone, I'd forgotten about that. Someone resent me my own video.
Yeah. I love that. So the Cropper, boil it down for you. The Cropper stuff is in the instrumental bridge of that song. And you hear this guitar going, da 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 da. That's Steve Cropper. That's just I stole it from Steve Cropper. That was just big, And then the other lick, which they got from, for now the Hold Me Closer thing, is in like the verses part of the song.
And how's that go? Can you?
That's little lick, something like that.
Yeah.
Just a very simple lick, but the tone and the way it's played, it's me trying to do Hendrix.
When I talked to Davey, I said, "So Caleb told me there wasn't any competition between you guys," and he says, by human nature, there probably was a little bit. He says he kept me on my toes. There you go.
Bless his heart.
He seems to have a lot of respect for you and what you do with that instrument.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's
I'll give you one here. I remember when Davey first joined Elton's band. I bumped into him at the office, Dick James' music office. Steve Brown was there. Steve Brown was still involved with some management with the band. And Steve said to me, "I'd like you to come up and chat with Davey, give him some advice." I said, "Sure, okay." Now, at that point, Davey had come into that band, but he wasn't really an electric guitar player.
Yeah, wasn't he mandolin or?
Yeah, acoustic, and came from a folk background. Very good. I mean, just great at all that stuff. But his electric skills were very minimal. That was a new deal for him. And so he had just bought a Les Paul guitar. So so I meet him in the office, and he says to me, "Hey, I got a question for you." He says, "I just got this Les Paul guitar." He says, how do you get a sound out of it? And I looked at him, I said, "Just turn it up." He said, "Okay." Yeah. And those were my words of wisdom and mentoring to the young Davey Johnson back then.
You knew Elton before he met Bernie.
Yeah.
By 2 years at least, right?
Sure, yeah.
65?
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
Did he come up to you and say, "I met this"? I mean, how did you find out about Bernie?
Oh, that was through Ray Williams.
Yeah.
Ray Williams was the guy that brought those two together. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
How did that go? Did he ever tell you personally? Elton ever tell you, "Yeah, I got a songwriting partner"? It's like,
oh, he did. Yeah. Oh, yeah. Absolutely. He was excited. We found this guy from up in Lincolnshire, writes great lyrics. So I'm going to start working with him. So, oh yeah, no, that was all very exciting.
When you were young, around that era, I know Steve Cropper, and what was in your record collection? What were you listening to back then?
Oh boy, everything.
Really?
Everything. Yeah. Elton and I were very, we had eclectic taste. So I grew up in a jazz background, so I'm still listening to jazz, but then in terms of rock music, I was listening to basically everything that was coming out, Mm-hmm. There was some good English rock players, guitar players back then. A guy by the name of Mick Green, who you most probably have never heard of, but there was a band called Johnny Kidd and the Pirates, who were so this is early 60s. They were a big group, used to dress up in pirate outfits and stuff, But Mick Green he used to play a Telecaster and through a Vox, and he just got this great sound and great way of playing, very syncopated way of playing, And he was a great guy. He, let me see, in around 64, 65, he left the Pirates and joined Billy J. Kramer and the Dakotas. Yeah. And so he was playing with them. I think his first recording with them was a tune called Little Children, which became a big hit. So they were signed to Brian Epstein and everything. Excuse me. And so when I started working at Dick James, I used to record a lot of demos for Brian Epstein's artists. So Jerry and the Pacemakers, the Foremost, Billy J. Kramer and the Dakotas. So one day we got a session going on, and in walks Billy J. Kramer and the Dakotas, to do the session for the day. And in walks my idol at that time, Mick Green. I'm going, oh my God, I get to record this guy. I get to, watch him up close and see how he does what he does. I mean, it was just fantastic. It was like a masterclass for free, And I remember they were in the studio for 2 days. So at the end of the first day, I asked him if I could borrow his guitar, take it home with me, and, I'd bring it back the next day. And he says, yeah, sure, no problem. Because he'd seen me play. Now the bass player, Robin, he said, hey, careful, Mick. Careful. And Mick was such a great guy. He said, no, he's okay. He's a player. He said, go home. Man, I took that guitar home. I played that thing all night long till I crashed out and brought it back the next day. It was one of the most greatest experiences of my life. Yeah.
That's amazing.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. Mick was wonderful. Yeah.
Goosebumps again. No, but that is one of those things you could never, no matter what happened to you, forget that.
No. Yeah.
What a good guy.
Oh, he was wonderful. He's not with us anymore. He ended up playing after Billy J. Kramer. He, talk about a left field turn, he went and played with Engelbert Humperdinck.
Wow.
Yeah. And I used to think, Mick Green and what in the world? He's playing all these syrupy ballads and stuff, what in the world is this? But he loved it because playing with Engelbert taught him how to read music,
Mm-hmm.
But he had a wonderful touch on a Fender Telecaster.
Have you ever done gigs through the years where they didn't pay you?
Oh, gosh, yeah.
Everyone says the same thing.
Oh, yeah.
I don't think I've interviewed someone who hasn't said, everyone says the same thing.
Oh, yeah.
I guess that's a certain part of the business.
Yeah, it's called, what do we used to call it? Paying your dues.
Yeah, I guess so.
It's that's the thing that I think is missing from a lot of today's young musicians because of things like American Idol and stuff like that. It's like they come out of nowhere. They haven't done any, they haven't paid their dues, and then they're on TV in a talent show hoping to win the jackpot. And there's no like integrity back there. There's no experience of hardship and stuff back there, which you have to go through.
There's a lady I interviewed last year, just haphazardly. There's a Canadian band called Honeymoon Suite, and they've had quite a few hits in the country. And I noticed a drum kit behind me, like I do. And I said, "Do you play drums as well?" So my daughter, Leah Marlene. Mm-hmm. And I said, "Is she any good?" So he sent me some stuff, and I went, "I'm going to interview her for my Canadian channel." So she came in second this year, and Leah's been playing since she's been this high. But she's actually an exception to the rule because a lot of them are like, "Oh, I think my Aunt Betty told me I can sing."
Yeah, right.
And I'm really cute.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
The cute thing. Someone asked, Bernard Joseph says, what is the greatest artist Caleb has ever worked with?
Boy, that's a tough one. I would have to say most probably Elton. Because he was, even though, he don't play any other instruments, it's piano and singing and of course songwriting, but in what he did, what he does, what he did, what he brought to the table was complete. It was complete. You knew exactly what the verse was, you knew exactly what the chorus was, you knew what the bridge was. It was very complete, and he trusted the musicians that he had around him. I did an interview just a few days ago, and somebody asked me, did Elton ever tell you what to play or hum a guitar line to you? Never. He just played the song. He trusted the chemistry that we had.
Yeah.
That's such a valuable thing is for years, me and him would get together and we listened to the same music, and it was all kinds of music. I mean, everything, jazz, classical, folk, rock, you name it, you know. I mean, we listened to all of it, you know. We were avidly studying production styles and technique, just going at it like detectives, you know. And so basically, if he would suggest anything, it would be a genre.
Right.
He would say, here's this song, you know, I'd like it to sound like Memphis. Oh, okay. I know what that sounds like. So, Steve Cropper.
I know last time we talked, I asked you, would you play with him again? And you said, well, I like to move forward and play, you know, I'm paraphrasing you. But if Elton called you and said, after this big tour, because everyone is assuming that he'll still do shows, he just won't be doing the big tours.
Yeah.
What if he called you and said he wanted to do a more jazzy thing or go in a different direction as an older Elton, an older Caleb? Would you ever be open to that, doing something a little different?
Yeah, I would. Yeah, I would.
That'd be exciting, wouldn't it?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, yeah. At our age, we don't need the big tour thing anymore.
Yeah. By the way, what's the question people ask you the most? It goes, if the people know who you are, they know what you've done. What are there a few questions they ask you the most? Well, like, is it, what's Elton like? Or
yeah, generally it would fall into the category of what was it like working with Elton John? Mm-hmm. Or what was it? Because they know, you know, they know about like the stadium shows that we did. What was it like? You know, what's it like playing to 100,000 people? Well, it's deafening.
Yeah, could you relate to John, Paul, George, and Ringo when they said, we don't want to do this anymore? We can't even hear our own music.
Absolutely, yeah. Sometimes the crowd was so loud, they'd be shouting so loud, and I'd be standing next to, you know, Kenny and Davey, and I would have to scream at them to say, you know, what are we doing next? What's the next song? You know, I mean, it was crazy.
When you were redoing Captain Fantastic, because you came in for when you guys did it live, right? For that the extra disc on Captain Fantastic, which were weird circumstances, because the first thing, all us fans, to be really honest, nothing personal, we all went, what the hell? Where's Nigel? Because Nigel taught me how to play drums. And but I think I've told you before, Roger was more, and you know, they're going to get on me for even saying this out loud. You know how they are. I like Simon Phillips. I like busy drummers. I like that because I like they're doing something I can't do. My son can do it. That's his kit. But Roger was more my kind of drummer. You can't help what you like. You like what you like. So guys, don't hate me. Yeah. And so that was okay. But that was interesting. You're coming in and you're learning this album that you guys weren't on. What was your first impression of the album? Because it's such an introspective, autobiographical album.
Oh, you know, I thought the album was great. I thought they did a great job. I thought it was really good. You know, it was a little different to what had gone before, but no, I thought it was a great album. You know, the biggest surprise I think, which was to anybody, was that he fired that band. Yeah, that was just a huge surprise, you know, because they were at their peak, you know, and that recording was really, really good. So we just learned the album, you know, we just learned it, you know, and added our little touch to it, you know. For
that live show's great, bud. Sorry to interrupt you. That live show's great. I love that. I listen to that more than I do the original album because I've listened to the original album so much.
Okay. Yeah. And that was another cool thing with Elton, at least back then, was because of the kind of musicianship we had with Roger and Kenny and James Newton Howard. We'd play these songs and he would always give us room to improvise. Yeah. So every night there was something a little different just to keep you fresh. He was very aware of that, you know, so it wasn't just like a, you know, parrot repetition of the song. You know, every night we could bring something fresh to those songs, which made it a lot of fun.
Nilsson Schmilsson, Coconut, Richard Perry, who, I mean, anyone who's worked with Richard, they always say, okay, another slice of tape, another slice. And how could he, like they said, he had a photographic memory. And I've talked to David Henschel, who'd worked with him a lot. And David said, like, it was just, he says, I don't understand that brain. What was that experience like? And even Harry's, was on another planet.
Oh, man. Well, all I remember was it was basically a nightmare. We went into, well, here's the classic story. So Lime in the Coconut, right?
Mm-hmm.
So we recorded that. I was in the studio with Roger. We went into Trident Studios. The song has only got one chord in it, C7. That's the whole thing, Dong jingy, dong jingy, dong jingy. So I'm playing that thing on the acoustic guitar, and the control room is upstairs. The control room is upstairs. You look up and you see the control room upstairs and look through a window. So we're downstairs actually in the studio. So you had to come down these stairs, and it was kind of like, what's that movie, Psycho? Do you remember the Psycho movie?
Yeah,
the grandma comes running down, and the door opens, Well, Richard and Harry, on this particular occasion, had both been doing cocaine and LSD. They were out. They were just on another planet, And Roger and I, we were getting paid triple scale, which was wonderful, And so we're doing this song, trying to do this Lime in the Coconut. Harry Nilsson's got a bag of cocaine in his pocket. Talk about another splice on the tape. He's doing a vocal track, and it's like after every other word, he's got to take a sniff. It was crazy. It was crazy. You put the lime in the coconut, it's sharing it all about. You put the lime in this went on. Well, to cut a long story short, we went in the studio at I think it was 8:00 in the evening, and we didn't get out of there till 2:30 the next afternoon. It's 16 hours or something crazy, And there was one point, we're playing this song, and Richard gets a flash of inspiration, and he runs down the steps, and I can hear his big feet coming down and says, boom, boom, boom. I think, oh, what's this? The door bursts open, and he runs over to the piano, and he starts playing. He says, it needs to go like this. And he starts playing a song by The Who called Can't Explain.
Right.
On the piano. Dum, da-da, dang, da-da, da. And I'm sitting there with the acoustic guitar going, dong, dingy, dingy, do you put the lime in the coconut? And he's playing it in E flat. So it's like the universe is apart, And I'm going, no, Richard, I think it goes like this. And then he runs back upstairs. And I forget who the engineer was. It could have been Dave Henschel.
I looked it up. I don't think it was. Can I just give you the? It's important here. Let me just get.
Sure.
Let me just look it up. I just looked it up. Hold on, because this is interesting. You might remember his name. I don't usually do this in interviews, but why not? This is
history going down here, folks.
Yeah, that's right. Hold on. Let me. Oh, here it is. Okay, so it says Robin Jeffrey Cable.
Oh, okay.
Richie Schmidt.
Okay.
And Phil Brown, and that's it. I thought David Henschel was on that, but I looked and I went, I thought he had told me he was on that, but it doesn't say.
No, so it could have been Robin. It could have been Robin because it was Trident Studios. So I look up into the control room, and all I see is this classic pose of the engineer with his head in his hands, just like this.
Oh my God!
And then I look over at Roger because I'm about ready to just call it a day. And I look over at Roger in the drum booth, and he's mouthing to me, he's going, triple scale. Hey. So, okay, I got it. Yeah, don't blow it now. Triple scale.
Was that the craziest session you've ever had?
The craziest by far.
Really?
Absolutely.
Nilsson Schmilson, Coconut, Richard Perry, who, anyone who's worked with Richard, they always say, okay, another slice of tape, another slice. And how could he, like they said, he had a photographic memory. And I've talked to David Henschel, who'd worked with him a lot. And David said, like, you know, it was just, he says, I don't understand that brain. What was that experience like? And even Harry's, was on another planet.
Oh, man. Well, all I remember was it was basically a nightmare. We went into, well, here's the classic story. So Lime in the Coconut, right?
Mm-hmm.
So we recorded that. I was in the studio with Roger. We went into Trident Studios. The song has only got one chord in it, C7. That's the whole thing, you know. Dong jingy, dong jingy, dong jingy. So I'm playing that thing on the acoustic guitar, and the control room is upstairs. You know, the control room is upstairs. You know, you look up and you see the control room upstairs and look through the window. So we're downstairs actually in the studio. So you had to come down these stairs, and it was kind of like, what's that movie, Psycho? Do you remember the Psycho movie?
Yeah,
you know, the grandma comes running down and the door opens, you know. Well, Richard and Harry, on this particular occasion, had both been doing cocaine and LSD. They were out. They were just on another planet, you know. And Roger and I, we were getting paid triple scale, which was wonderful, you know. And so we're doing this song, trying to do this Lime in the Coconut. Harry Nilsson's got a bag of cocaine in his pocket. Talk about another splice on the tape. He's doing a vocal track, and it's like after every other word, he's got to take a sniff, you know. It was crazy. It was crazy. You put the lime in the coconut, it's sharing it all about. You put the lime in this went on. Well, to cut a long story short, we went in the studio at like, I think it was 8:00 in the evening, and we didn't get out of there till 2:30 the next afternoon. It's like, 16 hours or something crazy, you know. And there was one point, we're playing this song, and Richard gets a flash of inspiration, and he runs down the steps, and I can hear his big feet coming down and says, boom, boom, boom. I think, oh, what's this? The door bursts open, and he runs over to the piano, and he starts playing. He says, it needs to go like this. And he starts playing a song by The Who called Can't Explain.
Right.
On the piano. Dum, da, 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 da. And I'm sitting there with the acoustic guitar going, dong, ding it, dong, ding it, dong, you put the lime in the coconut. And he's playing it in E flat. So it's like the universe is apart, you know. And I'm going, no, Richard, I think it goes like this. And then he runs back upstairs. And I forget who the engineer was. It could have been Dave Henschel.
I looked it up. I don't think it was. Can I just give you the? Let me. It's important here. Let me just get.
Sure.
Let me just look it up. I just looked it up. Hold on, because this is interesting. You might remember his name. I don't usually do this in interviews, but why not? This is
history going down here, folks.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. Hold on. Let me. Oh, here it is. Okay, so it says Robin Jeffrey Cable.
Oh, okay.
Richie Schmidt.
Okay.
And Phil Brown, and that's it. I thought David Henschel was on that, but I looked and I went, I thought he had told me he was on that, but it doesn't say.
Who knows? So it could have been Robin. It could have been Robin because it was Trident Studios. So I look up into the control room, and all I see is this classic pose of the engineer with his head in his hands, just like this.
Oh my God!
And then I look over at Roger because I'm about ready to just like call it a day. And I look over at Roger in the drum booth, and he's mouthing to me, he's going, triple scale.
Hey.
So, okay, I got it. Yeah, don't blow it now. Triple scale. You know.
Was that the craziest session you've ever had?
The craziest, by far.
Really?
Absolutely.
Liza Minnelli, what was that like? She seemed a little eccentric.
She was, yeah. That was a little better, but there was one point where we're in the studio and we're running down this song, and she was in the control room and she's listening to it, and she wasn't happy with the way it was going. So she comes in, she bursts in, the red light is on, we're doing a take, she's oblivious to that, So she destroys that take, and she comes in, she says, guys, she says, it's supposed to go like this. And she starts dancing across the studio because she's a dancer.
Right.
She don't know nothing about music, can't tell you what the groove or, nothing like that. So she starts, kicking her legs up and dancing, doing this dance across the studio, like we're supposed to interpret.
Did you get jazz hands? I hope you didn't get jazz hands.
I thought, oh boy, here we go. Yeah, that would have been a video moment right there. Yeah.
Man, that's amazing. I mean, the travels, right? I mean, don't you wake up in the morning and say, was that me? Was I really there? I was.
Yeah, it's like I've seen it all and done it all.
Well, Dusty Springfield would be another character as far as someone who had a long career.
Yeah, poor gal. By the time I got to record with her, she was not in good shape.
Is that right?
Yeah.
I'll name another one that's got a reputation. He's been called, who was it that I talked to? He said he had a mercurial personality. He either loved him, Lou Reed.
Oh, Lou Reed, yeah.
Steve Howe was on that session as well.
I'm sorry?
Steve Howe was on that. I don't know if he was at the same time, but he also played.
I don't think he was at the same time. He was on the same project, but not on the same session I was on. At least I don't remember him being in there. But that was a strange session. To me, my impression was he didn't really seem to know what he was doing. It was an odd. It was just very odd. I didn't enjoy it. I was never really a fan of his music. Like what was the group? The New York. No, what was it?
Velvet Underground.
The Velvet Underground. Yeah, I was never a Velvet Underground fan. I'd heard about him, and all that, but and he didn't play anything, so he was like basically co-producing it with somebody else, and I cannot remember the name of the producer, David somebody, and it was all a bit strange. It was. I didn't enjoy it at all.
Well, how do you get a gig like that? Like, for instance, if someone wants you, there must be gigs where someone had called you and said, "Oh, Caleb, I want to play with you," and you'd heard. You don't have to mention names. You'd hear the demo and you go, "These guys aren't ready to record." That must happen.
Yeah, but this particular thing, or back in those days, so that was like still early 70s.
72 for Lou Reed.
72, yeah. So in the studio world, it was still very musicians union. So we had contractors. So for the Lou Reed session, I was booked by a contractor that used to get me a lot of work. In fact, Simon Phillips would know him as well. He was the same contractor, David Katz, a guy called David Katz. So it was very union. You got paid for it was union scale and all that stuff, So that's how I got a lot of studio work, was through the union. You had to be, if you were going to do studio work, you had to be in the union. So that's how that happened.
And a Beach Boy, Bruce Johnson.
Beach Boys. Bruce Johnson was good to work with. He was a lot of fun. It was very good. I enjoyed doing his album. Played with he had a good drummer on those sessions, a guy by the name of Gary Malabar, who played for
Steve Miller.
Yes,
Eddie Money.
Yes. Yeah.
I love Gary Malabar.
Gary's great.
I can't get a hold of him. I friended him on Facebook. Chase just did 2 Tickets to Paradise and on his Instagram.
Okay.
And it has one of those. The drumming is like almost a little muddy. It's hard to play. It's hard to play right. Yeah. Like they used to say about Bonham. They go, you can't really, on notation with Bonham, it's hard to get it on there because there's like some weird ghost note. He came up to me, Chase, and he says, God, he says, this is actually really hard to play. It sounds it's like it's simple, but it's not. Gary's that good.
Yeah, Gary had a great feel. Yeah, Fly Like an Eagle. That's his masterpiece there. You know. Yeah. Well, I know it's been a few years since I've seen him, but I know he was living in a town called Thousand Oaks out here in California.
You know what? A lot of the times, Caleb, I just go online and someone got a hold, like Tony Tennille, who was on Blue Moves. I just said, hey, how do I get a hold of Tony Tennille? I'm a big Captain Ed Tennille fan, which surprised everyone. I went, why? Good music. I like him. You like what you like. You can't help it.
Yeah, sure. Yeah.
And someone said, yeah, I know his mess. I'm going to do that with Gary Malabar because he was Take the Money and Run. Yeah. You know, that's all him. Yeah. Jennifer Holiday.
That was good stuff too. That was great. That was David Foster produced that, and I got that gig through him. So that was recorded out here. And
she was on top of the world then. She was on like everyone. It's like she was the golden girl.
Right. And she'd just done the original Dreamgirls thing, and we were working with some of the guys from Earth, Wind and Fire. And we recorded it at their studios. So that was a great time. That was really great.
When's the last time you talked to Elton, by the way? Has it been years or?
It's been years, yeah.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah.
Because everyone assumes that's the thing. You know, everyone loves a reunion in music. They always want them. And it's the old, sometimes, not always, I'm not saying in this case, but I'm saying sometimes it's like taking a road trip with your ex-wife. Some band members either don't mesh or some band members just lose contact, and it happens. Argosy, Roger Hodgson?
Oh, gosh. That's way back. Oh, gosh. That was a one-off thing. When did we do that? That was that has to be maybe like 1970, something like that.
Yeah, it's on your wiki page.
Oh, okay. Yeah, that was like when he first started, and he was trying to get a deal, I think, with Island Records. And so it was myself, Elton was playing on it, and Dee and Nigel. And I think it was just the one or two songs. It was just a one-off thing, you know. It was for him to try. So this is pre-Supertramp.
With Bluesology and Long John Baldry. I love the story of Elton Dean and Long John Baldry for the name. But I set up an interview for one of my partners who used to syndicate radio shows, and he says, "Oh, can you get a hold? Can you call him up? I'm setting up the reel-to-reels." It was actually that reel-to-reel, that Studer right there. I eventually bought it from the station, but which I heard now is worth $10,000. I had no idea.
I bet, yeah.
But so I'm phoning. You know, I set up the interview, and I never talked to him. So I phone it, and he's at a hotel room for whatever. And he's got this big. He lived in Vancouver at the time. I think that's where he died. He's got this great big voice, right? Long John Baldry.
Oh, right. That's right. It was up in Canada. Yeah.
Yeah.
Right.
So we were in Edmonton, I think, at the time. But anyway, what was that experience like with him? He seemed like an interesting character.
Oh, absolutely. Oh, man. Oh, he was something else. Yeah, Baldry was great. That was... How can I describe that? That was...
Are you trying to be nice right now? Are you trying to be...
Yeah, well, you know, it was just because when I worked with him, I think I was still a teenager. So it was 1967. So yeah, I was about 19. So it was like you learned a lot of stuff from him because he'd been around and seen it all, you know. And he was definitely an interesting kind of guy. Yeah, he was a one-off, that's for sure.
Okay, having listened to you explain it in that way, let me ask you, when you put the book together, when you put the documentary together, we live in a society where someone releases an album, all the younger generation, and all of a sudden, not to mention names, but Demi Lovato comes to mind. Someone who says, all of a sudden there's this big scandal that they release, and I'm going, can't you sell it without doing that? But it brings the question of when you're. I mean, obviously, you know things about all these artists that you're not going to repeat because it's that it doesn't need to be said. It's not necessary.
Right.
How was that for you? Of going, you don't seem like a type of man that would do that. But how do you balance that when you're doing interviews, when you're writing a book, documentary? How do you do that?
Yeah. Well, I think it's an issue of integrity. And I don't want to, everybody I've worked with, I try to extract what's positive out of it, Of course, we all know it was a world of, sex, drugs, and rock and roll, but I'm not going to harp on all of that because we've all made mistakes and stuff like that, so what, that doesn't help anybody to just kind of focus on that. I'd rather focus on the good things.
Yeah.
The positive things that I got out of it that helped shape me to be the kind of musician and person that I am today. And so that's why I won't do that, And my book in the movie, it doesn't say anything bad about Elton. It doesn't point at everybody knows what Elton's been through, so I don't harp on that, and just, I kind of rather more focus on the music, what made the music, the friendships, the chemistry, and a whole lot of laughs,
Did you run into racism?
Oh, sure.
And how were you prepared for that? Like, did you have friends, family? I remember talking to there's a duo called Tuck and Patty.
Oh yeah, right.
He's a guitarist. He's white. She's black. She's an amazing voice. I remember having lunch with them in Edmonton, and I asked them, and they said, "Oh my God, I could tell you stories." She said, "We don't share them. We don't name names, but were you prepared for that?"
I was, because of my father, my parents. They were professionals. My father was a professional musician, and he was black and he encountered racism, and I used to see him get upset. But both my mother and my father, my mother was a dancer, and they instilled something in me that whatever you've been gifted with, you need to be as good as you can possibly be. So my mother used to go for auditions for dancing, she'd be the only black girl in there, and she used to tell me, she said, well, if you're black and you go to these auditions, you need to be able to dance on your eyebrows.
Wow.
Yeah. So she would see, other white girls go in who couldn't dance that well, but if they looked okay, they'd get the gig. But she knew that their timing was off and blah, 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 blah. But if you're black, the only way to rise above that is to be better.
Good advice.
Oh, it is. It really is. It really, we're given gifts, so, that's do whatever it is that makes you shine, do that, And so that's what I did as a young kid, I was good at athletics in school. I was one of the fastest runners in about 4 schools I went to, all this kind of stuff, and it was, because people used to say things, and I thought, okay, all right, see you on the track. And then I had when I was 13, I had a band in school, and we used to win all the school competitions. We're playing Chuck Berry, early Beatles and stuff, and the girls would start screaming, and their boyfriends would get upset. They want to beat me up because I got some color on me and they want to beat me up. But I was very fortunate in that a good friend of mine in the school just happened to be the All England schools boxing champion, guy by the name of Tony Bennett. He was black too. And so he would escort me out to the bike rack.
Thanks, Tony.
School. Yeah, unbelievable. I had my own security at school at 14 years old. It was unbelievable.
Yeah, props, man.
Yeah. So this kind of ethic. So coming up through the 60s, I never bothered. The racism was there. I used to see people get real upset about it, but I was always very confident in knowing what I could do. So when I got booked for a gig or something, I was going to show up there prepared and play some guitar that basically nobody else at that time could play.
Yeah.
Because I knew one thing that what is it? My dad used to tell me, you're only as good as your last gig. So if a producer or an agent or somebody's watching, you're only as good as you are on that day, which is going to determine whether or not they're going to book you back.
Yeah. Yeah. And he'd know, your dad.
Oh, he knew. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Well, your mom knew.
Yeah, they both knew it. Yeah.
Eric Carmen wrote this thing. I'm not sure when it was written. I was recording my radio show. I still do a show for Vancouver in the little room back there. And he had written like Boats Against the Current. He got Gus Dudgeon. He wanted Gus Dudgeon to produce it, which is, I think, the album after the All By Myself album, the self-titled album, which was his first solo album.
Right.
So and I really like the album a lot. I can understand why he didn't make it. But he said he had Gus Dudgeon in there. And he said, well, I want to do this. And I'm paraphrasing like crazy here, but he said, I want to do it in this chord. And Gus had told him, he said, well, I wouldn't know the difference between that. I just know the way it feels, the way it should sound. That's all it would. Did Gus not know notation? And do you remember?
Oh, notation? I don't think so. Music notation?
Like chords? Like, did he just know in his head what he wanted it? Because obviously he was quite successful.
Oh, sure, yeah. No, he didn't know chords and stuff, music, none of that.
See, I don't know why that surprised me, but I mean, look what he came up with.
Yeah. No, he knew sound. Yeah, and rooms, and of course, back in those days, again, this is back in analog days. Right. Gus was great at recording drums because he understood how to mic a room. That's a lost art these days.
Yeah.
Because of digital and everything, So, but back in the analog days, a good engineer, he had to know the room. That's a lost art. So the drums sound good in that corner, the piano sounds good over there, the guitars sound good. They would map out the room. They would know exactly what sounds best in the room. There's also Bernard Purdy's drums in Atlantic Studios in New York City back in the 60s were nailed to the floor. And nobody was allowed to move those drums under threat of death, because that is where the drum sound was happening.
Wow. I know his son. He's a good drummer too. Very groove like his dad, just in the pocket, stays there, and man doesn't move. Like the Jeff Porcaro thing of going, wow.
Mm-hmm. So that's a lost art. Those engineers, they knew where, same with EMI, the whole thing,
Wow. Someone asked, Brian Boudreau says, does he know Eric Clapton? Once called him the best guitarist in the world.
Yeah. That was back in 2000 on the David Letterman show.
That's all I have to say. How did you feel, Max Highbaugh? How did you feel about being involved in the Elton John band in the early stages of his career and being invited back? What was that? Well, the early stages. What was it like when it was growing? You could see it grow. I mean, you were right there.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, absolutely. No. Oh, it was just a bunch of, ton of fun. It was great, And I was back in the early days, I was involved not only in Elton's project, but also my own with my band Hookfoot as well. So I was like multitasking all over the place, engineering sessions and just developing my career as a complete musician, as I like to describe myself.
Hookfoot to me is one of the most underrated bands in the history of music.
Yeah.
You guys could play. You guys.
Oh yeah.
Man.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
Someone asked. William Colville says, "Will there ever be a Hookfoot CD box set?"
There was one that was put out in Japan, and I think it's still available online.
These usernames. Lula Delfo. Who asked you to play on Tommy, the soundtrack? Are you still, well, we already talked about, are you still in contact with Elton or Townsend, etc.? But how did you get on the Who soundtrack?
On the Pete Townsend asked me to do it. Yeah, that was Pete. Yeah. I knew Pete, and I played on his first solo album prior to that. I think it's called Who Came First.
Never had that one.
Yeah, it's a solo album he did. And so I played on there. And then it was through Pete.
Joan Armatrading, you were there right in the beginning. On the finished product were you on, or just the early?
No, and there.
There's a story.
And the story, I'm wondering whether I should tell it because I don't want to give it away because the story is actually told by Davey brilliantly in my movie.
Oh, well, no. We'll save that. I
think we should, yeah. The way Davey tells it, it's just brilliant.
If you want to pick up his new book, a new version of the new book, updated, there is links at the very top of the description. Remember, if you want to help the channel, the 2 P's are there. Patreon, you can have early access to our videos. Or if you simply want to make a donation to Rock History Music or Rock History Book, the link is at the very top of the description for PayPal. Or simply buy a t-shirt. Remember to like our videos, it makes a big difference. And if you like what you see, subscribe to our channel, share our videos on social media, and make a comment. We always read the comments. I'm John Beaudin, this is Rock History Music.